we tend to kind of tolerate things that have been normalized because we sometimes think that we're the only ones that, notice something is off, right? So it's really unfortunate. And sometimes when that's all you kind of tend to accept that.
Hey friends, welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live the life that you design instead of choosing a life you think you have to settle for. As always, let these conversations be your guide. So welcome to the holidays, the hustle and bustle of the holidays. It is cold as hell here in New York. I know a lot of people are turning up during this time, going to work, going to parties. I'm the opposite. I turn down. This is a time of year where I am looking at my calendar and looking at what can I not do? What can I say? Hey, let's circle back in the new year. I'm in the circle back in the new year heavy. Anybody who's saying, hey, I want to chat or, let's hop on a call. I'm like, January sounds good. January sounds good. And what I'm making room for is time to dream. In my year, I always make time for the unexpected, the unknown. I mean, I was flying by the seat of my pants this year. So much happened that I could have never dreamed of or accounted for. But there is structure to it, so I can go out with intention because I believe that intention precedes the blessing, right? Like I really do, is that, you have to put yourself in position to receive. And so that's where, I think the intention comes in. And so this is my dreaming period where all I want to do is curl up with a book. And speaking of dreaming, that's what we're talking about on today's episode with my friend Ariane Hunter, she might be the first guest maybe the second now, who is a repeat guest here. She was one of the first guests on the podcast when we launched, and she's come back because now she is an author. And this is her book, Dreaming on Purpose is the name of her book. And it's really, as I tell her during the episode, you'll hear, it's a blueprint on how. I know it might sound weird of like, you don't need to know how to dream, but I think that when culture is feeding you all of these messages about what you can't do, about what you should want, it's a revolutionary and a radical act to say, let me ask myself what I want and then construct a plan to go get it. It's a much harder thing to do, but it's also more fulfilling. Ask me how I know. Just a quick programming note. If you are watching this on YouTube, it's a little bit of a shorter version. We recorded this in October. I was in LA. Ariane is in New York. Daylight savings, like all the things. There's a confluence of things happening. So it's a little bit of a shorter version. But if you're listening to it on a podcast platform, then you get the entire conversation. I hope you enjoy. Follow Ariane. We've put all of her contact information in this book. This is a nice stocking stuffer as well to give to the person in your life who wants to make 2025. Like they're like, all right, it's my year. They want to buckle down. This is a great stocking stuffer to say, let me give you a resource to go ahead and do that. So Ariane Hunter is our guest this week. I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say about dreaming on purpose and the manifesto that she's created around it. All right, here's Ariane.
So Ariane, I just want to say, first of all, congratulations on this book. How does it feel to have author added to all the many things that you've done? How does that feel?
Oh God, wow. Thank you for having me on here. It's still kind of like a pinch me moment. The book's been in the world for a couple of months now, and it's still just like I'm still having just like those moments where I'm like, it's here. I'm holding it in my hand. I'm flipping it through the pages and, talk about having something just like in here for so long.
You worked on it for so long.
Yeah. It's really amazing. And, just riding that wave.
No, I love it. I love it so much because it's also what I like so much about it is that it's so practical. it really hits on like all the things that you think about, you address. And
Yeah.
so, really, the premise is really talking about how Black women can be free in systems that were created without us in mind. And that freedom is
Mhm.
still available to you, and you might just have to create it for yourself.
Sure.
So, why do you think that entrepreneurship is that vehicle that can provide that?
Yeah, it's entrepreneurship has long existed, way before it became this sexy thing, to pursue. And in writing the book, I thought about, just how entrepreneurship showed up in my own lineage. And so through that, just asking those stories and understanding who were those women that came before me, it's discovering that, my great grandmother, was one of the original, entrepreneurs in my family. She's from Jamaica. It's amazing that she was able to basically corner the market with a coffee and cocoa bean business. And I talk about that in the book, and just, in talking to my relatives, my family members, just about her legacy and her story. And it's, I've always heard, like, we've never seen her, actually work for someone. She's always worked for herself. And so that was really encouraging, just to see that she was able to build something for herself and reclaim that narrative and not be a part of someone else's system. So that may not be, the reason or the words that she would put it in, but it really was that narrative, that decision, that came from her, for what it means to work and to succeed and to support, oneself. So it's really kind of that example of what it means to step outside of, systems, especially systems that were not built for us in mind, and build something entirely of our own. It is about freedom. It's about financial freedom as well, because there's no limit, there's no ceiling to really how far you can go when you're deciding that you're driving the ship, and deciding what is success for you, right? But it's also the emotional and the spiritual and the mental freedom that also is a part of that package. Entrepreneurship really creates, that way for us to do work in a different way, that nurtures us, that honors our boundaries, and builds wealth on our own terms, whether that's internal wealth, mental wealth, generational wealth, and economic wealth, right? So I think it's one of the most powerful paths, that we can take to reclaim agency. It's definitely not the only path. I want to put that out there. But it is one of the most powerful paths that we can take for ourselves, because in it holds so much richness, and liberation to really define, what works for us, because we just know that the systems that we're in, that ain't it. That ain't
Yeah,
it.
right. And
So
tell me about how that's shown up for you, and how entrepreneurship has opened doors of freedom in the many ways that you defined it, which I appreciate.
mhm.
Talk about how that's been transformative for you.
Yeah, I realized really early on in my career that, something just about, our current work cultures and how they were designed, how they were set up. There's something felt really misaligned with that. Like what the tools that we need to succeed, in the workplace. Where are those tools? Where is those access to those tools? Where am I reflected, in my own career path, right? Not seeing a lot of leadership, that looked like, women like me, people like me, right? So realizing really early on that this is corporate, most corporate environments just did not seem like a place that was built for me or that was designed for me, right? So I didn't always have the language to say, like, this is it, but it just showed up, internally, in my body, just
Hmm.
feeling that something was off. And so, being in those environments, I thought, okay, well, I'll just, I'll change jobs. Clearly it's the company, it's the employer. I just need to get a better manager, a better boss. I need to change my title. I need, something is just off. Let me go out and seek externally how I can feel, like I belong, and that I'm included in, this corporate America that they say you must pursue, on the path to success. So, thinking about, the recognition, the paycheck, the boxes that we check, right? The stability and the security, this narrative that's kind of sold to us. And again, it's really examining, what those narratives are, and seeing, does this path work for me? So I really started to feel burnt out and disillusioned very early on. I endured a lot of distress and heartache from very toxic bosses, toxic environments where, and my story is not, uncommon, and so, the emotional toll that, had on me, I had to leave, to save myself, to save my own
Yes.
sanity.
Yeah.
I talk about it in a book. It's like, it's scary, and I know that you've had your experiences with that
Hmm.
too. It's very scary to leave something that is, comfortable, even though it may not be exactly good for you, right? So even that in and of itself is sort of that path of exploration and liberation to really bet on yourself, right? And start to reimagine, how do you want your career path to look like, and knowing that you are deserving, of something that is, nurturing and fulfilling. So these are all of the things that like sort of, surface for me as I was going through it. And entrepreneurship just became that natural path for me, where I wanted to really creatively express myself. I wanted to solve a solution that felt, personal to me. And,
Hmm.
I fell into this world of coaching, career coaching, and, not even really realizing that that was, an opportunity or a professional path that I could pursue. But, as someone who's, always been sort of, just wanting to push back on the status quo, and really start to examine, how we can do things differently, career development, career coaching, like how do we think about success, how do we think about work, all of those things really, really lit me up, because I was also examining it for myself. So, entrepreneurship became that natural path for me, and supporting other women who were going through, similar pathways within their career, and just having those conversations within community and personally, and knowing that we're not alone, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, and the rest is history. But yes, that path sort of just became something that became my mission.
Part of what you said kind of leads me to this question of what do you think that we normalize that is
Mm.
really a sign of uh, a current situation not working? Like what emotions or experiences do you think culture normalizes that you're like, that's actually not okay? Like there is another way of being.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that question so much. Somewhere along the way, we decided that, we were going to, have this culture of work set up that everyone would buy into, and that we just agree that this is the normal way to do things. Until people started burning out, until people started, really pushing back on, wait a second, I'm sacrificing a lot of me, for an employer and for a company that doesn't always, have my same loyalty and best interests, back, right? So,
Hmm.
thinking about just even the stress, that we go through, we start to develop headaches. I worked with a client once who had worked for a financial services company, and, typically they tend to be very, very fast paced, very like high intensity, pressure filled environments. And so she developed headaches, and this was just normal for her, that she was just, carrying around Tylenol with her, back and forth to work. And so examining, it became normal for her, and really examining and challenging, like, is this how I want to show up? We tend to kind of tolerate things that have been normalized, because we sometimes think that we're the only ones that, notice something, is off, right? So it's really unfortunate, and sometimes when that's all you kind of tend to,
Yes.
accept that, right? And so sometimes you feel like you're crazy. You're the crazy one,
Yes.
for right. It's like, why am I feeling this way? This is not normal, folks. This is not the way we should be doing things. How, we're spoken to at work, the mistreatment there, just be, getting used to, like, being the only, in most workspaces, this is not normal. And so a couple of years ago, we're going through the pandemic, and, we had the great resignation. A lot of things just started to come to the surface when folks started to really realize, this is not, this way of working is not, it's not
Yes.
working.
This way of working is not.
It's
Yes.
not.
Full stop. Right. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
continue on this path that we've been, and something has to change. And so the unfortunate part of that is what I'm seeing, is a return back to the way things used to be pre-pandemic, right? Returning back to the office, divesting in DEI, deciding that it's no longer important, and so sometimes when we go through these shifts, these changes, the status quo can be so strong and so alluring and so familiar that we tend to move backwards and go back into to old patterns, right? So this is part of the work, that resistance, that continuing on that path, of standing for the things that we learned, during the pandemic, and not going backwards. We're having a lot of discourse around that, especially in this presidential election. So what a time to be alive and to really, connect with the things that we want to build for the future, because we cannot continue to as the way things were.
Yeah. I have a community of journalists that I foster when we're talking about how to like reinvent your careers and stuff like that. And one of the things that I realized was that I was in newsrooms, you're in a community of people who are coping. And so everybody is like utilizing a coping mechanism because you're in a fast-paced, high-pressure environment, right? And because a lot of people are coping the same ways, you're thinking like that's actually healthy. And it wasn't until I left that I'm like, that's really not healthy. Right? You know what I mean? Like that's really destructive, actually. But you're in a community where a lot of people are adopting the same mechanisms. Because that happens, then it becomes normalized. And so if you were to say that was wrong or that's not helpful, then you're the outlier, right? And sometimes it's so hard to identify because everybody else is doing it, right? And so it's sometimes like there's so many things that I didn't recognize about what was triggering or what I didn't like, just because it was just so normalized. And it wasn't until I didn't have to do it anymore that I could be like, oh, that doesn't actually work for me. You know what I mean? Like, I actually just like don't like that, or that puts me on edge, or it starts my day wrong, or it doesn't allow me to show up as my best self, things of that nature. But I wouldn't have known it until I like removed myself from it because it was so normalized. So, how do we begin to have conversations like this? This work requires a self-awareness and a radical honesty, because you might not like the answers that come back, like you might not, because I just remember in my transition, there's like over the years, because it wasn't just like a short thing, it'd be like, oh, like I want this. And then, like, God, I want this thing. And then I get the answer. And I'm like, ooh, that's not what I asked for. Let me just go back to how I was doing, because that's not actually what I asked for, because I don't want to do everything that comes with the truth. Right. So how did you have to like cultivate a muscle, but also a capacity for what the truth was really going to tell you?
Yes, I love this question so much. You're absolutely right. It really is very confronting, right?
Ooh.
It's very confronting to be, to see your own, your own truth, right? What have you been settling for? What has been normalized, to your earlier question? What is it that you really want? This has been something that, every time I ask my clients this question, what do you want? Right? It's just, I've never thought of it, right?
Yes.
It's like, you don't slow down long enough to actually look inside and actually see and actually say that this is no longer okay for me, right? So sometimes we delay that, right? Sometimes because we know, like, once you know what you know, you can't go backwards. And I had so much of that when I started out. It's like the veil has been lifted, right? So now you have to do something about that, right? So that radical honesty, as you put it can be very, very uncomfortable. So I think for me, it was, and I'm still learning this process, by the way. This is not something, and that, like, we're not aiming for perfection. We're not aiming for an A+. Healing is a journey. It really is. And you're going to feel like, feeling really good one day, and then the next day you're knocked on your ass. And then that, like, you have to be with that discomfort as well. So it was a lot of that, just really being okay with that discomfort. It's like, okay, Ariane, you really need to look at where are you lying to yourself, right? Where are you being dishonest? Even within your dreams, within the context of your dreams, it's like, okay, I'm doing this thing, I'm starting a business. But even in that, you can be playing small, right? So really, always assessing, always checking in, where do I feel outside of my integrity, right? And it's okay. This is not to penalize yourself or to self-judge or to criticize or anything like that. If anything, it is that practice of compassion and of care, accepting, embracing where you are in the journey, knowing that you are in this moment, this snapshot in time. It's not going to define where you are, where you continue to stay, not unless you allow it. But again, like, really getting honest. I think, I talk a lot about community as well. And having, sort of those army of angels, I call it, or that, your sisterhood that can reflect back at you, and say, hey, Ariane, you know what? You're not dreaming big enough. I think you can do more. We all need those people around us, right? To reflect back that honesty. And sometimes other people can see you a lot better than you can see yourself, right? So allow yourself to be, surrounded by people who are always going to be honest with you and not just yes you to death. Like, yeah, girl, that's a good idea. You'll definitely, like, you also don't want to, have the naysayers, of course, but you always want to have those cheerleaders in your corner that is always going to be honest with you as well.
Yeah. And I also like the exercise of thinking of your funeral that you talked about in there, envisioning your funeral. And yes, it does sound morbid, but sometimes to start, you got to think of the end to craft the beginning. I really think of. I mean, that's where you really have to get honest, right? And I actually did that kind of instinctively, and that was the swiftest kick to my butt because while everybody was like cheering for me, I was just like, do I want to be known for the stories that I'm actually covering? Like, am I putting stuff out in the world that is helping people make better decisions about their lives, or am I just contributing to noise and fodder in this way? Do I want my eulogy to say, and she told great stories, like, just generically, like, would that feel like, and I'm not saying that it's, I think journalism is really important, especially now than ever before. But when you know your capacity, and when you know that you're not operating in the fullness of what you came here to do, and even though other people might be praising where you are, but when you know you have more and you're not operating in more, and you're not operating with the impact that you know that you can have, then you are actually, or I will say, I was actually a disappointment to myself. But I really think that envisioning your funeral that you talk about in the book, that I want you to expound on, is a great exercise to really address this idea of this radical honesty that we're talking about.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, envisioning your funeral, it's one of the most humbling things that you can do for yourself. And, it's oftentimes when we experience it when we experience a death, or we experience, a slowing down, a grieving, even that happens. We all experienced that collectively during the pandemic, where we had no other choice but to slow down. And we were seeing literally, folks that were just dying every single day, so how can that not, really, really, push you to think about what matters, and what's true for you. One of my, I call it, kind of a foundation that I go back to just keep myself grounded, and to remember to keep going, as I think about my grandmother. And I talk about her in the book, and she passed away from, her body just stopped working. She, had cancer, and she worked right up until her body gave out. And I often think about her, and just what she stood for, and how the choices that she had and did not have. Right. And at the time, being an immigrant to this country from Jamaica, and, just taking the jobs that she can take, she didn't have the space to dream. She didn't have the space to, to think about other things, of course, that she wanted to do, and to have a fuller life. Right. So that her memory, really keeps me grounded, because I feel that I have that responsibility to her, and to my ancestors who did not have the opportunity to dream, to absolutely dream full out, and to the extent that I can, with the privilege that I can, with the responsibility of, and the weight of that, I do not take lightly. So you're really, thinking about, those who have, did not have the opportunities that you had, and thinking about, if you're not doing the things that you are called to do, or that you feel are within your capacity to do, what is that thing? What do you want your life to stand for? What is, worth it to you to fight for every single day? What would it mean for you to push past those fears, right? Sometimes those fears really keep us locked and stuck, right? But when you think about the mission, that you're here to do, those fears become very, very tiny in comparison, right? So one of the first times where I actually practiced that, envisioning my funeral, the words "she went for her dream" came to me. I was sitting, in my apartment in Queens, and I, just wanted to know, what was next for me. And so I knew in that moment, hearing those words, "she went for her dreams," that is my mission. I have to step into that, and not in a pressure filled way. It's just, this is my calling, and what I'm here to do. That is something that I want to be able to say, on my tombstone, is that I went for my dreams. I don't want to die with all of these ideas and passions within me. That is so selfish.
The last segment is called ACT UP, ACT. As you know, those are my initials. And so somebody who's saying the name of the book is Dreaming on Purpose. And so you were talking about earlier space, having space to dream. So I want to ask, for the person who needs to create space to dream, what can they do today to start doing that for themselves?
Oh, yeah. I love that. So for me, just defining for yourself, the first step to dreaming on purpose is just decide that your dreams matter. Decide that you deserve to be at the forefront of your life, right? To be that main character. It's about dreaming with intention, right? Allowing your dreams to really inform how you live, how you work, and being completely unapologetic about that. It's not just about your career. It's about how you nurture your mind, your soul, your body. When I decided to write my book, it wasn't just about the end product of just having a book. It was always a dream of mine. It was always a goal to do it, but it was about the healing process that happened as I sat down to write, and page over page, word over word, to share my story. So it's the same when I consider my wellness, right? Rest and care are part of my dreams too, right? Learning to be self-advocate, for my boundaries, to communicate my boundaries, to articulate that, right? So success to me, it's not about the accolades, but it's, it's not about those specific milestones. That's part of it, right? But it is about creating that space, like you said, feeling peace, feeling ease in your life, right? So really deciding for yourself, I am worthy of this. I deserve it. Knowing that it's going to be hard. This is not about like you decide to follow your dreams and then you run off into the sunset. Absolutely not. But really committing to that act of self-love, right? And self-care, right? Because all of your stuff is going to come up when you decide to dream on purpose, right? So it's being ready for that, knowing that you can handle that. It's all a part of the process. So when you're living your truth, your career, your relationships, they all start to align. You all start to feel, in alignment and integrity with your dreams. So decide that your dreams are worthy. Decide that they need to be the center of your life. Make time for them. Make space for them. One of the practices that I, adopted early on is, and this is especially if you're working full time or you're working part time and you're doing, a side hustle or however, you're sort of mapping it out, right? Set that time on your calendar. If you're not a calendar user, get to be one. Make friends with your calendar, even if it's an hour a week. Okay, I promise you, keep that appointment to yourself. Once a week, an hour. You can expand it as you go along. But when you do that, you're giving yourself that messaging that your dreams matter, that this is important, right? When you're declining other, commitments and other things that you have going on because you need to protect that time, that signifies to other people that your dreams matter and you're taking them seriously and they will follow suit. And if they don't, you have to do a little bit of pruning, in our relationship. That's another conversation, but absolutely decide that this is worthy of you, and set aside that time every single week to recommit every time, every week.
I love that. Ariane, how can we support you and stay in contact with you? How can people work with you if they need a coach?
Absolutely. So I'm really excited. I have the Dreaming on Purpose career study group and book talk happening this month. So I'll be releasing some details very, very soon. But the first place that you can find out more about that is on my newsletter, the Dreaming and Doing Digest. So that is a weekly newsletter that I submit to my subscribers to let them know what's going on. So the details are going to be announced soon, but I would say sign up to the Dreaming and Doing Digest to learn more.
Fantastic. And also get your book, Dreaming on Purpose. Yes. So when I see you next, I need you to sign it for me.
Absolutely. Got it.
Super duper proud of you. It's just been lovely to watch. It's been amazing to watch. And I just can't wait to see how many more people are now set free when they get this in their hands and they can see, because sometimes what the barrier is that people don't even know it's possible. And so what you have done is show them not only that it's possible, but give them a blueprint of how to do it. So bravo, friend. I'm so proud of you. And congratulations.
And thank you to you, to folks like you, to people like you who are taking the leap and who are going for it. I see you too. I see you, and I'm inspired by you as well. So keep going.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Andrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.